My mother-in-law looked me dead in the eye at her son's funeral reception and said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, "You were never really part of this family. And now that Marcus is gone, you have no business being in that house." I'm Maya Callahan. I was 32 years old, 8 months out from burying my husband, still learning how to be a widow and a mother at the same time. My daughter Poppy was 4. She was sitting right there in her black velvet dress, holding a juice box, and she looked up at my mother-in-law with those big brown eyes like she was trying to understand something that didn't make sense. I didn't say anything that day. I just put my hand on Poppy's back and steered her toward the cookies. But I remembered. I always remember. Let me back up because you need to understand what I'd been carrying before that afternoon ever happened. Marcus and I had been married 6 years. We met in graduate school in Columbus, Ohio, both of us studying urban planning, both of us with big ideas about affordable housing and city infrastructure that we talked about over terrible dining hall coffee. He was kind and funny, and he made everything feel manageable. We moved to Cincinnati after graduation, bought a small craftsman house in Hyde Park that needed a new roof and about 40 weekends of work, and we were happy. Really, genuinely happy. His family was always a complicated thing. His mother, Lorraine, had strong opinions about everything. How I cooked, how I decorated, whether Poppy was sleeping on the right schedule, whether I was breastfeeding long enough. His older brother, Derek, wait, I can't use that name. His older brother, whose name I'll call what he always went by with the family, which was just brother, though his real name was something I came to associate with cold Sunday dinners and barely disguised contempt. I'll just call him what he was, my brother-in-law. And his wife I'll call my sister-in-law because honestly, giving them names feels like more than they deserve right now. Marcus's dad had passed before I met the family. It was just Lorraine, my brother-in-law, his wife, and a rotating cast of aunts and cousins who all took their cues from Lorraine. Lorraine was the sun in that solar system. Everything orbited around her approval. I tried. God, I tried. I brought food to every family gathering. I remembered every birthday. When Lorraine needed her car taken in for repairs, I took it. When she had her knee replacement, I drove 40 minutes each way to bring her groceries twice a week for 6 weeks while also working full-time and nursing a newborn. Marcus appreciated it. He saw what I was doing and he loved me for it. What I didn't know, what I only found out later, was that Lorraine had a very different story about me running in parallel. Marcus got sick 18 months before he died. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3, and then stage 4. The time between diagnosis and the end was brutal and fast. And during that time, I became his full-time caregiver while also working remotely and keeping Poppy's world as normal as I possibly could. I read him books in the hospital. I learned how to manage a port line and administer IV fluids at home. I held him together, and he held me together, and we got through every single day until the days ran out. Lorraine showed up for the last 2 weeks. She was helpful in some ways. In other ways, she would corner me in the kitchen and say things like, "He wouldn't be so tired if you let him rest more," or, "I think you're overwhelming him with visitors." There were no visitors. It was just us. After the funeral reception, after the comment about the house, I filed it away somewhere in the back of my grief-fogged brain and just kept moving. I had to. There was a mortgage to pay, a daughter to raise, bereavement leave to navigate, life insurance paperwork to untangle. I didn't have the bandwidth to process Lorraine's hostility. I just put my head down. The first real warning sign came about 3 months later when my brother-in-law called and asked if I'd given any thought to what I was going to do with the house. "What do you mean?" I asked. "Well," he said, and I could hear him choosing his words, "Mom always felt like Marcus would have wanted the house to stay in the family. In case, things got hard for you financially. We'd be happy to take it off your hands." I told him the house was mine. Marcus and I had bought it together. Our names were both on the deed, and I had no plans to sell. He said, "I'm just saying, keep it in mind," in a tone that made my skin crawl. A month after that, Lorraine started posting on Facebook. Vague things at first, about family loyalty, about how loss changes people. about how some people show their true character when times get hard. I knew they were about me. The timing was too deliberate. And sure enough, two of Marcus's cousins messaged me separately, gently, asking if everything was okay. I kept my mouth shut. That was hard. Every instinct I had wanted to write a response in a public comment explaining exactly what I'd been through for the past 2 years. But something told me to wait, to document, to let them keep talking while I stayed quiet and kept records. My best friend, I'll call her my work friend because she'd kill me if I put her name anywhere online, worked in HR at a law firm. She didn't practice law herself, but she knew people. And one evening when I was at her apartment, after Poppy had fallen asleep in the back of my car, she looked at me very seriously and said, "Maya, I think you need to have someone look at Marcus's estate documents. All of them, not just the will." I told her I already had a copy of the will. It was straightforward, everything to me, guardianship of Poppy to me, his personal belongings divided with a few sentimental items going to Lorraine. "I know," she said, "but I want you to talk to an estate attorney anyway." I almost didn't. I was exhausted and broke in the way that grief makes you broke. Not necessarily without money, but without the energy to spend it on anything that felt speculative. But something in her voice made me call. The attorney I found was a woman named, I'll use an initial just because she asked me to keep things private, L. She specialized in contested estates in Ohio. We met at her office in a bland building near downtown Cincinnati, and I brought every document I had, the will, the deed, our joint accounts, Marcus's life insurance policy, everything. Elle called me 3 days later. "I need you to come back in," she said. I knew from her voice it wasn't good news. What she'd found was this. 6 months before Marcus died, when he was still in the hospital, when I was barely sleeping and running on coffee and adrenaline and pure love for my husband, during that window, Lorraine had approached Marcus about adding my brother-in-law's name to a quitclaim deed for our house. Marcus had said no. Elle had found email records of that conversation, and Marcus's response was clear and documented. But someone had filed a quitclaim deed anyway, not the one Marcus refused to sign. A different one. One with a signature that looked like Marcus's, but that Elle said showed irregularities she wanted a forensic document examiner to look at. My hands went completely numb sitting in that chair. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" I asked. She looked at me steadily. "I'm saying there is a document on file with the Hamilton County Recorder's Office that may not be what it claims to be, and I think we need to find out." The next 4 weeks were a blur of calls and certified mail and a forensic examiner out of Cleveland who cost me more than I'd ever spent on anything non-house related. I borrowed money from my parents, something I had never done as an adult, and I told them only that I was dealing with a legal matter related to Marcus's estate. My mom didn't ask questions. She just transferred the money and said, "Whatever you need." The forensic examiner came back with a written report. The signature on the quitclaim deed was, in her professional opinion, inconsistent with samples of Marcus's authentic signature. The pen pressure was different. The letter formation was different. Marcus had a very specific way of writing his capital M, a thing I knew because I'd watched him sign his name hundreds of times, and the M on this document wasn't his. Elle filed a complaint with the Hamilton County Sheriff's Office. I didn't tell Lorraine. I didn't tell my brother-in-law. I didn't post anything on Facebook. I went to Poppy's pediatric checkup and helped her through a flu shot and took her for a Happy Meal afterward. And I sat in the McDonald's parking lot while she ate her nuggets, and I stared out the windshield at absolutely nothing. That was the longest stretch of silence I've ever kept. Lorraine called the following week. Her voice was different, a register higher than usual, something tight in it she was trying to control. "Diane," she started, and then caught herself because my name isn't Diane and I filed that slip away too. "Maya. I wanted to see if you and Poppy wanted to come to Sunday dinner." "We're busy," I said. "Thank you. Is everything okay? I feel like we haven't talked in a while." "I'd just been managing a lot," I said, which was the truest thing I'd said to her in months. She started to say something about the house, some roundabout version of her earlier comment about family interests, and I stopped her. Not rudely, quietly. "Lorraine," I said, I have an attorney. If you need to communicate anything about property or estate matters, please have your attorney contact mine. And I gave her Elle's name. The silence on the other end of that call was something I will carry with me for the rest of my life. 3 weeks later, two investigators from the county sheriff's office contacted my brother-in-law for an interview. I only know this because one of Marcus's cousins, one of the good ones who'd reached out to me months earlier, texted me and said the family was in an uproar and that my brother-in-law was freaking out, and that Lorraine had been crying for 2 days straight. I put my phone down and went and sat on Poppy's floor while she played with her Legos, and I watched her for a long time. The investigation took 5 months. During that time, Lorraine stopped posting on Facebook entirely. My brother-in-law's wife sent me one text, just one, saying she hoped things could be resolved peacefully. I didn't respond. My brother-in-law was eventually charged with filing a fraudulent instrument, a felony under Ohio law. Lorraine was not charged. The investigators found insufficient evidence that she had directly participated in the filing, though Elle told me privately that the communication records showed she had, at minimum, known. The charge against my brother-in-law was later pleaded down, but it was on record. The quitclaim deed was invalidated. My house was unambiguously mine. The week the case was settled, Elle called to walk me through the final paperwork. When she was done, there was a pause. "You handled this well," she said. "A lot of people in your position either panic and do something reactive or they freeze. You didn't do either." I thanked her. Then I sat in my car in the parking lot of my office building and cried for about 20 minutes. Not sad crying, just the crying that happens when something you've been holding very tightly finally gets to be put down. I want to tell you what happened after, because I think the after matters as much as the fight. I didn't reach out to Lorraine. I haven't spoken to my brother-in-law since before the investigation. I don't know if I ever will. What I know is that after it was over, after the deed was confirmed and the case was settled, something shifted in me. I stopped waiting for them to apologize. I stopped even wanting it, really. The apology wasn't going to give me back what they'd tried to take, and even if it had, I wasn't sure I had space for them in our lives anymore. That space was needed for other things. Poppy started pre-K that fall, at a school 5 minutes from our house. She made a best friend named... I'll just say she made a best friend, and I watched them run to each other at pickup every day with the kind of pure animal joy that only exists when you're 4 years old, and your entire world is the exact right size. I stood on that sidewalk in October sunshine and thought, this is what it was for. My work friend threw a dinner at her apartment the month after the case closed. It was just the two of us and her husband and another couple we both knew from before Marcus got sick. We ate pasta and drank too much wine, and I ended up telling the whole story for the first time out loud, in order, beginning to end. They asked questions. They were horrified in the right places. They laughed when I got to Lorraine's Facebook posts, because in retrospect they really were absurd. By the end of the evening, I felt lighter than I had in over a year. That winter, I also went back to work on a proposal I'd put aside when Marcus got sick, a project about affordable housing renovation incentives in older Cincinnati neighborhoods. I'd written the first draft 18 months earlier, before everything fell apart. I picked it up again, revised it, and submitted it to a regional planning grant competition. I won it. $30,000 for the program and a citation from the county commissioner's office. My boss sent a company-wide email about it. I printed it out and put it on the refrigerator, and Poppy saw it and said, "Did you win a prize, Mommy?" And I said yes, and she said, "Like at the carnival?" And I said, "Kind of. Yeah, like at the carnival," and she went back to her cereal. I tell that story because I want you to understand something. The best revenge I ever got wasn't the quitclaim deed being invalidated, even though that mattered enormously and I would fight it 1,000 times over. The best revenge was that after everything, after the funeral and the grief and the legal nightmare and the months of holding a secret so tight I thought I might break, my life just kept going. And it got good again. Not the same good as before. Different. Quieter in some ways. Louder in others. Mine in a way it had never been. I think about Lorraine sometimes. Not often. I think about what she must have felt like, or what she must have been so afraid of. To let things get this far. Grief does strange things to people. It doesn't excuse what she allowed to happen. But I don't lie awake anymore being angry at her. I don't have the room for it. What I have room for is the late afternoon light that comes through the kitchen windows of the house I kept. Our house, Marcus's and mine. The one I changed the locks on the week after the case closed. When Poppy is doing her homework at the table and the dog is asleep on the floor and I'm making dinner, I have room for that. I protect that with everything I have. There's a particular kind of freedom that comes from being pushed all the way to your limit and finding out you can hold. I didn't know I could do what I did. I didn't know I could stay quiet when I wanted to scream, or stay methodical when I wanted to collapse, or keep showing up for my daughter while fighting a fight she didn't even know was happening. I know now, and whatever comes next, whatever new version of hard thing that hasn't introduced itself to me yet, I know I can hold that too. There's something I keep coming back to when I think about what Lorraine did and what my brother-in-law did and what all of it cost everyone involved. It wasn't that they were cruel people in some dramatic movie villain way. It was that they made small choices, one after another, each one a little worse than the last, and they never stopped to ask themselves what those choices were building toward. That's how most real damage gets done. Not in one big explosion, but in a slow accumulation of decisions made by people who convinced themselves they were justified. I made choices too. When my work friend told me to see an attorney, I almost didn't. I was tired. I was grieving. It felt like one more thing to carry. But I went, and when Elle laid out what she'd found, I had a decision to make about what kind of person I was going to be in that moment. Someone who reacted out of rage and pain, or someone who stayed clear-headed enough to actually protect her daughter. I chose clear-headed. Not because I'm naturally calm. I'm not. But because Poppy was 4 years old and she needed her mother to think straight, and that need was bigger than my anger. That's the thing nobody tells you about doing the right thing under pressure. It doesn't feel noble when you're in it. It feels like grinding. It feels like holding your breath for months. It feels like sitting in a McDonald's parking lot, watching your kid eat nuggets while you stare at nothing and wonder if you're making a mistake trusting a process you can't control. The integrity isn't in the feeling. It's in the choosing, over and over, even when it costs you something. I think about what I had to develop to get through those months. I had to learn to be honest with myself about what was happening, even when the truth was frightening. I had to think clearly and strategically when everything in me wanted to just react. And I had to keep going on the days when keeping going felt like dragging myself across gravel. Those three things, being honest, thinking clearly, refusing to stop, those didn't come from anywhere outside me. They came from needing to survive something I never asked for. What I know now is that the situation revealed something. It didn't build my character so much as it showed me what was already there. I had more steadiness in me than I knew. I had more capacity for patience than I'd ever had reason to test. And I had a daughter watching me, even when she didn't understand what she was watching, absorbing something about what it looks like when a woman refuses to be taken from. Lorraine got what she built. My brother-in-law got what he chose, and I got what I fought for. The house, the quiet kitchen light in the afternoons, Poppy at the table with her homework. That's not luck. That's cause and effect. Every action in that story produced its logical result, and the result I live in now is one I earned by refusing to take shortcuts, refusing to lie, and refusing to give up. That's enough for me. That's more than enough.